Doesn't seem that way. It's been one of the crazier off seasons I can remember, that's for sure.
We're in June. We've got some position battles. We got a lot of things happening. And then I think these Cary Williams comments, I mean, I'd really like to get your take on where you fall on this. I mean, he said some pretty damning things, whether you like Williams or not. I mean, he's a good player, not a great player. He says the team was out-coached, exhausted. We got our teeth kicked in. We were ill-prepared. I mean, these are direct shots at the coach, are they not?
Oh, absolutely they are. And, Cary Williams is an interesting case. I mean, I saw a lot of people on Twitter reacted by, sort of posting photographs of Cary getting beat, by this or that receiver during the season. And, there's something to that. But the fact is, Cary Williams won a Super Bowl with the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, there's a guy that's been around. He's now in Seattle, which is his fourth NFL franchise. He knows a little bit about what he's talking about. And I don't think you can just discount anything he says, just because you'd rather not listen to it. I think if I was Chip Kelly, I would listen very closely to what Cary Williams had to say and just try to see what you could possibly learn from it. And if anything, fix it and move on. I mean, you don't want to, if you're Chip Kelly, you don't want to say, forget everything I believe. I'm going to change everything and do it differently. But, if you have a guy like Williams who's got an opinion and he's got some other experience and he's got some things to say, and there might be a lesson or two in there. I just this is not a guy that's he's a guy that likes to just speak his mind and everything. And it was like kind of odd last year when he went off after a win and talked about how everybody had dead legs. But the fact is, Kelly did adjust his practices somewhat based on what the feedback he got from his veteran players. Listening to those guys can actually help. So, Cary's not being very discreet or subtle about all this. But, again, if Kelly can get something positive out of it from a veteran player speaking his mind, that's probably what he needs to do.
It's interesting because in the interview on 710 ESPN out in Seattle with Brock and Salk, he said he was asked to compare how Seattle was compared to his other stops. And he said, well, I played for three teams, but two of them kind of stick out, Tennessee and Baltimore. He said they both had great players who were great leaders, and he said their coaches gave you everything they had and kind of talked about the culture. He did not mention Philadelphia. I mean, did you sense that Williams and the coaching staff or Williams and Kelly just did not see eye to eye towards the end? Was it an ugly situation?
I don't think it had to be quite that much of a deal, but, Cary said what he said in September about the practices being too much and you're basically playing a couple of games every week and that's taking something out of the players when it comes to Sunday. And if he felt that way, then, that's legit. But the other thing that's come up is that, Malcolm Jenkins has been the leader basically in saying that, they just weren't coached very well in the defensive backfield last year. And John Lovett was the defensive backfield coach for Chip Kelly's first 2 years. Kelly moved him into the scouting department and hired Corey Unlin. And Malcolm Jenkins has been talking him up, almost like a convert to a new religion. Ever since the minicamp started and the OTA started, basically saying that they didn't communicate very well before. They didn't handle fundamentals very well before, and all of that looks kind of bad on Lovett, and then that would in turn reflect on Bill Davis, who's the defensive coordinator, and ultimately all of that comes back to Chip. I mean, he's the head coach. If one of his position groups is getting poorly coached or not coached well, and it's a big problem for the team, and they're losing games because of that, that does at some point become a head coach problem. So, I mean, Kelly's addressed it, and he's made a lot of changes. He got rid of 3/4 of his starting secondary and the position coach. So clearly something was very wrong there. Whether it was the coach's fault, the player's fault, or some combination, you can argue about that forever. But obviously Kelly agreed that something had to change because almost everything changed.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting thing because of Williams' stature on the team not being as high as somebody else. I'd be interested to see fans' reaction if it would be different if this was Trent Cole saying something like this. I think because it's Williams, the fans have a tendency to say, "Well, he's a crybaby." I mean, do you have any connection between him and a guy like McCoy. People keep saying, hey, if you don't want to be here, if you're not buying in, you're out. Because another thing that Williams said basically was, I wasn't buying into what they were doing down there. I just didn't, whatever it is they're creating, he said, I don't believe it. So it sounds like, again, if you're not believing, you're out the door. So do you think if Williams, I mean, I guess because his play was so mediocre, the fans didn't care that he was gone. But we said before, I mean, was he that, is Byron Maxwell that significant of an upgrade over Williams? Maybe he is, maybe he's not. But was Williams so bad that you release him and then Seattle says, hey, we'll pick him up? I mean, Seattle's a pretty good team. So you wonder if it's just because it was Williams. If someone like Cole said this, would it have more credence?
Yeah, I think it would. But the other thing that is at work here is that, Cary Williams gets cut. He had a huge, it was like $8 million salary cap hit. That was a lot of money for a guy that wasn't really playing at that level. So, there were a couple things going on with him. But he leaves here, Seattle signs it. I mean, that's a team that's been in the Super Bowl the last 2 years. They signed Cary Williams. Bradley Fletcher leaves here, the New England Patriots sign him. And he's probably going to start there, it looks like. That's a team that coaches defense pretty well, values defense pretty highly, and just won the Super Bowl. And Patrick Chung, who didn't fit in here, is playing well with the Patriots. So that tells you something. Nate Allen, I mean, it was only the Raiders, you could say, that signed Nate Allen. But he got a lot of money to go play in Oakland. So the three guys the Eagles said goodbye to were their starting cornerbacks and one of their safeties. All got good jobs for good money and or with very good teams, with teams where they expect to contend. So I mean that does tell you something. When those guys sign a guy like Cary Williams in Seattle, they don't just take a call up on the phone and say, hey, here's a contract. They watch film, they look at what's going on. They bring him in for a visit. They talk about the scheme you were in, how you fit in our scheme, what was going on there, why did you have so many problems. And clearly they believe what guys like Williams and Fletcher are saying because they signed them. They're giving them real money and expect them to contribute to really good defenses. So, there's a real problem in that secondary for the last 2 years. And, changing all the players could help. Bringing new guys in can certainly help. A new coach could certainly help. But clearly it was a big problem and a systemic problem because, no one thing was going to fix that. They pretty much had to change everything, and they did. So I think it would, if guys like Trent Cole or D'Amico Ryans is a guy that Chip Kelly clearly thinks a lot of, if guys like that were the guys saying it, it might have a little more weight. But it seems like there's a cult of Chip Kelly to some degree around here, which is fine. People really believe in him. They like what he did. So he can do no wrong in some people's eyes. So if someone criticizes him, that person's automatically the enemy now. And that's fine. But when you have enough guys out there who are good players or at least respectable players saying similar things or things that all kind of go in the same direction, and, it just tells me that there is at least a little bit of an issue for Chip Kelly and the players on this team.
We're talking with Phil Sheridan, ESPN.com, NFL Nation, covering the Philadelphia Eagles, of course, their OTAs. The big story up there. I find it bizarre, Phil. I don't know where you stand on this, but you could read two different articles, and someone would say Sam Bradford is hobbled and doesn't look anywhere near ready, and someone else would say he looks like he's fine and he's right on track. How is it so different of opinions on this guy with where he is?
That's a good question. I mean, he's moving around okay. He's not like moving around like Michael Vick used to move around, but he moves around pretty well. And I think one problem that we have here, and it's not the kind of thing you want to harp on, but it's really true, is that we go through these practices, and pretty much every day, all the main drills have been taking place on the far field, as far away from the media are allowed to stand as possible. So everyone's looking about 70 yards away to see what's going on. And I think that's part of the problem. I mean, when you're looking at, a guy's body language and what he's doing and how he's moving and stuff like that, and he's, way across the complex from you, compare that to when they're on the field right near us, you can basically see everything and get a real feel for it. I think that's deliberate. I think Chip wants to keep it as far as he can. but it does make it a little difficult to make really, keen observations. I've been trying very hard, either what I write and even what I tweet out, not to say too much about anything like I'm reaching conclusions about almost anybody, because I can't see them that well. And the reality is, people report on this lineup change or that lineup change. Well, Chip basically said, look, it's June. We're just getting guys a lot of reps, getting them on film so we can talk to them about what they're doing. Different guys are playing different positions. They're moving around. Don't read into it. I mean, don't make too much out of what you're seeing, who's playing a right guard or left guard or safety or cornerback in these drills, because everybody's playing everywhere, and it doesn't mean that much. So, part of it is the way they do things, and part of it is where they practice compared to, where we're allowed to stand and what we can see. And I guess everybody kind of sees things the wrong way. If you really thought Bradford was a great move, then you're probably seeing a guy moving pretty well and throwing the ball really hard and accurately. If you thought Bradford was a mistake, you're probably seeing a guy looks like he's limping a little bit and not moving that well, and not comfortable in the offense yet. So it's a little bit of the eye of the beholder there, I think.
Yeah, and I do. That does make some sense to me, because I'm watching film on just the television and just watching him walk around there. They're HD right up in your face, and I'm like, I can't tell if he's limping or just like going through the motions kind of slowly. It's very difficult to see where exactly he is. And then you have Sanchez, who has looked, by reports, a lot better here. Do you sense that Sanchez looks better, number one, and number two, sounds a lot more comfortable?
Yeah, I think that's the case. And I think the value here for all of us now trying to observe this team is that last year we were watching Sanchez, and he looked, okay, not particularly good, but not terrible. But he was coming off an injury. It was a shoulder injury in this case. Although he was cleared to go, he was not throwing the ball nearly as hard or with the zip that he had before. He said himself that, he watched the film from last year's practices and is stunned by just how, his throws aren't getting there with any kind of velocity. He expects to see the ball arrive because he knows how it's supposed to get there, and he can do that now. So, here's a guy that physically was not all the way there and was learning a new offense. And now we're seeing him look really comfortable and, really effective and kind of in command of things. And basically Bradford's going to be going through the same process. So it may be that Sanchez looks a little better than Bradford throughout this whole training camp and even into the season a little bit. But at which point we won't be allowed to watch practice anymore anyway. But if that's the case, it's important to notice, what Bradford's doing now is kind of what Sanchez went through last year. Different injury, different part of the body and all that. But he's learning a new system, and he's doing stuff that he hasn't been doing in over a year, just not really playing any football. So grading everything on a bit of a curve helps a little bit. It could make Sanchez look a little better throughout this process, but the coaches have got to look at this and go, well, if it's close, you got to go with Bradford because he's a guy you're paying $13 million, and you have to decide whether to re-sign him to a new contract, and you only have this season to make that decision. So, playing, because Sanchez is a little bit ahead of the game right now, playing him over Bradford is really a terrible move for the overall health of the franchise.
Evan Mathis, Phil, where do you think this is headed?
Boy, it really seems not to be going in a very positive direction, and it's a shame because having covered him for a few years now, I like Mathis a lot. I respect him. He seems like a really smart guy. I understand the situation he found himself in was that, he got to be kind of far in his career before he really found a home with the Eagles. I mean, he was, kicked around a little bit, got to the Eagles, everything kind of clicked for him. He fit the system well, and then when Kelly came in with a new system, he fit that well, and he became a Pro Bowl-type player. But he got his contract just before he became that Pro Bowl-type player. And, while he's making, in the neighborhood of $6-7 million a year over the next 2 years, for him, he's looking at what other Pro Bowl guards make, and it feels like, this is his last year. He's 33 years old. If he was 27, he would probably play out the contract and hope to get one big score at the end. But he doesn't have that luxury. There is no next contract for Evan Mathis, probably. This is it. So he's got to try to amend this while he can. Meanwhile, the Eagles look at a guy who's 33, missed almost half the last season with a sprained knee, and is making, a lot of money, more than he's probably going to make if they release him and he gets another contract somewhere else. And he's not going to do much better than he's doing. So he's jeopardizing the ability to make really good money. It just doesn't seem like a smart play on his part. I'm not sure if it's the agent who's Drew Rosenhaus. I'm not sure if it's Mathis. I'm not sure exactly how that all how that works with those guys, how their relationship works. But it seems like Mathis is, he's kind of put himself in a no-win situation. I would like to have seen the Eagles do something like they did with Connor Barwin, tear up his contract a little bit and take some, incentive money he was going to make based on contract language and just give it to him. Just find a way to, make a few, give him a few dollars, save some face, he gets some money, they get, happy Evan Mathis, which is going to help them. But it's unfortunate because Kelly really seems to be annoyed by him at this point, and the fact that Mathis isn't here just doesn't bode very well.
Yeah, he's annoyed by him. He also seems annoyed by Earl Wolff. Do you get that sense as well?
Yeah, I was a little surprised by that. They seem to be bringing him along pretty slowly. And, 2 years ago, Wolff hurt the knee. They tried to bring him back. He wasn't very effective, and he had some pain in the knee. And then last year he came back after, rehabbing and everything else, and it turned out he needed surgery on it. And, that whole process just cost Earl Wolff a season. They had just done the surgery right away. He might be all the way healthy right now. So he's trying to, he's concerned about rushing back because he did it already once and hurt it again. It's funny because when Kelly's like, oh, it's just June, don't worry about it. But with Earl Wolff, he's really annoyed that he's missing some workouts in June. I assume from listening to Earl Wolff talk that he's figuring, look, it's better that I miss a couple workouts in June and I'm healthy in training camp than that I have a setback now and it affects the rest of the season. So, but Kelly's comments the other day were really kind of, a little bit sharp for a guy like Wolff, who's basically a decent kid who's had this knee injury not go well so far and is trying to fix that.
Phil Sheridan, everybody here over at ESPN.com's NFL Nation, at Sheridan Scribe on Twitter. And, of course, the Eagles have their mini camps next week. And then Eagles training camp begins August 2nd. Before you know it, they'll be back out there August 2nd with the real deal ready to go. We'll be all over it here on your home for Eagles football. Thanks, Phil. Always a pleasure, pal.
Yeah, enjoy it, Mike.